Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
My name is Beneeta Kaur. I'm a board game Twitch streamer and social media consultant. And did y'all know that Washington, D.C. residents drink more wine per capita than any other state? And I'm definitely guilty of increasing that number.
Oh, it's all you.
It's all me.
I was
contribute
wondering.
to that.
I was wondering.
Yeah, it's all me.
I'm Corey Thompson, co-owner of Above Board TV, co-host of Board Games Insider, founder of Dice Tower Dish. And my interesting fact is there are two American presidents, Herbert Hoover and John Quincy Adams, who had pet alligators while they were in the White House.
Weird.
That's fun.
Yep. Surprisingly, too.
Yeah, well, and obviously you work in the alligator facts as a former vet.
Always.
I love it. I'm Daryl Andrews, a freelance board game designer living in Toronto, Canada. I'm also a consultant for Meister Media. And my fun fact, of course, because I love board games, the Avalon Hill Game Company was founded close to DC in Catonsville in 1952.
I'm just gonna have to correct you because I did live in Baltimore as Catonsville, but that's fine.
Catonsville.
So close.
I mean,
It's so close.
That's not what us Canadians call it.
Oh, okay.
I'm just using the vernacular of a Canadian.
And welcome to Nerdabout, Episode 7, Washington, D.C., brought to you by the good folks at Lucky Duck Games. Coming soon from Lucky Duck are the cooperative occult app-driven adventure game, The Dark Quarter, and Kickstarter gems, Unconscious Mind and Andromeda's Edge. Unconscious Mind, by the way, will have early copies for sale at BGGCon and PAX. You heard it here first.
Ooh.
This is a show about travel, food, culture, and general geekatois. I did that for the Canadians in the audience.
Thank you.
Yeah. We are three good friends within the board game industry who, through diatribe, discourse, and diction, have ended up in some absolutely amazing cities. So, what have you guys been up to lately?
Well, I mean, I think it would be fair to say it's been a tough week. As we will, I'm sure each mentioned, our friend was lost, Amber Cook, and we just want to send condolences. I knew Amber my whole career in games, and have known and watched her journey. So she's amazing and will be missed. And but beyond that, this week I also was hosting Matt Kint, a friend of mine, comic creator. I even have some of his comics kicking around because he left me some. And we got to play a bunch of games. Got to play Duck and Cover and Fishing and Fury of Dracula. We tried a new game called Chartered. And we had a lot of fun. Even did a road trip to London, Ontario, and such. And then on Sunday was actually my 17th wedding anniversary. So
Congratulations!
Thanks.
Yeah, congrats, man.
I got to go to an art show. Every year, Toronto hosts a 3-day art museum show down at the convention center. So we went and did that on our day.
Okay, well, Daryl, I have to ask. Chartered, that is the game that you made me get because of FOMO. How is it?
Good.
Oh no, it was such a heavy game to bring back from SN2.
Maybe bring it to BGG and flip it.
You didn't like it that much?
I mean, I'm going to make new rules up. I will briefly say the initial concept sounded really good. I did play it 2-player with Matt Kint. I don't like 2-player. And it is a game that should probably be played with 3 or 4 players, probably 4. It kind of has Acquire vibes. It kind of has Chinatown vibes. It kind of has, what's the Emerson game? Foundations of Rome.
Yeah.
So all these things are games that I love. Yeah.
Okay. Well.
Man. So, yeah, I am done with traveling. Remember, I was traveling for like 5-6 weeks altogether, and I'm back in the Napa Valley area right now, finally. Wow. And I actually have Sean Wainwright and his wife Patty from Lucky Duck at the house. So we're doing a little bit of Napa Valley touring now. So it's been a crazy weird week.
Yeah, I want to, Amber was actually my mentor years ago for it's a tabletop mentorship program. And she was super instrumental in getting me into the industry. And one of the reasons why I went freelance and also hired me for my first ever social media gig. So it's been a really emotional weekend and because it was so unexpected. So
I feel bad. I only just met Amber and her boyfriend Paul when I was in Maryland, which was
yeah.
literally a week and a half ago. So I've heard so many wonderful things. I've certainly known about Amber in the industry for a while, but yeah, it was a shock.
Yeah, and we can't really talk about geekiness without mentioning games and stuff, which is the biggest board game store generally on the East Coast. And Amber was really instrumental in the new store with the new store location and the new branding and marketing. And so we had planned our Washington, D.C. episode a few weeks ago, and we just wanted to say, we all had different relationships with Amber, but she was such a powerful force in gaming for individual rights and for women, game marketing, just design in general. And she will definitely be missed by the three of us and all of us.
Yeah, well said.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But, let's talk about nerds. And DC is made for nerds. Like, this is the nerd city. If you're a book nerd, there's Library of Congress. If you're and also there's a bajillion museums. We have the National Gallery of Art. You can't talk about DC without talking about Smithsonian. There's so many Smithsonian museums, so I'm not going to talk about all of them. But growing up, the Air and Space Museum was one of my favorites. So many field trips. Every time someone would visit us from India, we would always go to the Air and Space Museum because it is such a astonishingly cool museum. Also, that's where the only time you could go see IMAX movie back in the day was.
Right.
Yeah.
IMAX came everywhere. So then you have the National Zoo, National Museum of Natural History, where you can see big ass dinosaurs everywhere.
And yeah, I grew up in New Jersey, and even that far, it's about a 5-6 hour drive. We still did regular field trips to Washington, D.C. And I remember spending whole days with family or with school just in the art museums that are within that Smithsonian group of museums. And you just can't understate how many art museums there are. There's the American Art Museum, the Arthur Sacker Gallery, the Freer Gallery, National Museum of African Art, the Hirschborn Museum, the Portrait Gallery, the National Portrait Gallery, the Renwick Gallery. It's incredible how much in art you can spend weeks just going through the art within DC.
Yeah, no, the Smithsonian's iconic. I mean, even as a Canadian, coming from afar, it was always exciting to get to explore, and I always knew, I couldn't explore it all. Even actually, some of my earliest child memories. I have like, for instance, some stamps from the National Postal Museum that my dad got when he was there. My dad passed when I was 3. Yet that's something that's really cherished by me, is like these little mementos or these things from the gift shops. I mean, that, as I later went back to there and other Smithsonian spots, we as geeks, we love hard and we love to explore and collect.
So another one that I just want to throw out there that's kind of near and dear to me is the National Cryptologic Museum is in DC.
Ooh, that sounds
so
geeky.
Corey, it's perfect.
It is so nerdy. And I love cryptology and the history behind it, and the story of Turing and the breaking of the Enigma code during World War II. The personal connection, I've actually have an original Enigma machine
Of course you
in
do.
the house.
Of course
that
you do.
It's just sitting around. Collecting dust randomly.
Casually.
I bet you it has board games stacked on top of it, just chilling.
It's so much worse than that. It's a piece of history, and it should be in a glass box, and everybody who comes to the house plays with it.
Yeah.
So it is well used and well loved.
Things should be well used and well loved. So we mentioned games and stuff. Huge game store in near Baltimore. So there's also a lot of game stores in like the DC, Rockville area. We had Marion on for like our episode 0. And if you don't know Marion, she is amazing, been in this a long time, is one of the leaders of Gen Con. That's actually where I met her years before the Beneeta you see here. It's so funny. We just, I guess both needed friends to play board games with. We signed up for a meetup. We met at a store called Dream Wizards that mostly focused on Magic, but they did have board games, and I didn't feel excluded, which took me a few different meetups to feel that way. And we just clicked and vibed, and we started like playing games together at that store. I think it was like every Thursday. And so now we both work in the industry, and I just thought, like, I remember I met Marianne when I was like studying for the bar, like years ago. So because she used to be an attorney too, and I remember just being like, man, am I going to pass the bar? Am I going to pass the bar? I hate being a lawyer already. But yeah, it's just such a small world. And we have to talk about the awesome game store in DC called Labyrinth. It's not a very big game store, but they are so community involved. Kathleen, who's the owner of the store, does a lot of things to be involved in the DC community. I know she works a lot with teachers and local other businesses. They also have like a really big once a year like auction, which I actually attended many years ago, and it's a very fun vibes. They're doing like Halloween stuff this weekend. So a lot of people credit them with why DC has such a strong gaming community. And actually there's something called AwesomeCon that started 5-6 years ago, and I went for the first few years, and games are a really, really small portion of it, but the game library it is and always has been provided by Labyrinth. And over the years, their gaming portion, I've heard, has really increased, which is really cool to see, because AwesomeCon is like a pop culture convention, but it's cool that the tabletop section is like rapidly increasing, and Kathleen is a huge part of that reason, or Labyrinth is a huge part of that reason.
In DC proper, I want to talk just a little bit about the DuPont Circle chess tables. This is like an iconic background of movies area. It's a bunch of stone chess tables outside, and there are pros, hustlers, amateurs, people playing for money, people playing for fame all over. And I got an opportunity when I was really little. My dad and I got to bring a really famous chess grandmaster to this outdoor chess area. And this was Botvinnik, who was really, really famous Russian grandmaster in the 80s. And at one point, one of the hustlers, who was absolutely enormous and quite honestly frightening looking, jumped up, pointed out this little teeny Russian man, and yelled, "You're Botvinnik." And he just died. So I have this vivid memory.
That's hilarious.
And other like cool sites for DC is that like DC has a really like shockingly big comedy scene culture. I actually have a fair number of friends who started doing comedy shows in Baltimore and DC, and now do comedy in New York. So do they stay in DC? No, but it's a good jumping off point. And then finally, we have a lot of bookstores like Kramer Books and Politics and Prose. Kramer Books, and especially, have a lot of good cakes and pies. Spent a lot of time there in my 20s, and Kramer Books is in DuPont Circle. So DC is great. If you're a nerd, come visit and then let me know.
Well, it is absolutely my pleasure to introduce our guest for this episode. Our guest is designer Elizabeth Hargrave, who is the designer of the games Wingspan, Mariposas, Tussie Mussy, The Fox Experiment, and the newly released Undergrove with AEG. I had the absolute pleasure of hanging out with Elizabeth when I was in Maryland a couple weeks ago. And just absolutely an amazing friend and an amazing person. So welcome, Elizabeth. So There we go.
Hi.
So awesome. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
We've got kind of our list of questions. Our standard first question is usually, tell us something fascinating about DC, Maryland area that we just don't know.
Yeah, so when we talk about DC, usually I think people are really talking about what we call the DMV, which is DC, Maryland, and Virginia, right? We got three whole jurisdictions going on.
That was a surprise to me.
Yeah, and so DC proper is like 700,000 people, and then the metro area across the three jurisdictions is like 5.5 million.
Wow.
And so my fun fact is that DC proper has been majority minority since 1957.
Ooh.
Wow.
And the suburbs now are some of the most ethnically diverse counties in the country. Montgomery County, Arlington, Alexandria, sort of that part of the DC suburbs are
So cool.
incredibly diverse, immigrants from all over the world. And it makes it a really interesting, fun place to live.
I was blown away with just the diversity that was there. I remember going to an absolutely enormous Korean grocery store.
Yeah.
the H Mart,
Yes.
which was incredible.
We love our H Mart.
I love H Mart. You got to go to H Mart. You got to go to Latte. You got to go to 99 Ranch. Yeah, I mean, as someone who grew up in the DC suburbs or Maryland suburbs, like it was a really good place to grow up as someone who's not white. Because there was a lot of people that looked like me, and for the most part, it was a very I went to a big school with a lot of diversity. But I have to ask you a question, Elizabeth. How often do you get when you accidentally reference DMV? People think you're talking about the MVA. I didn't need to look at your license. I'm like, oh, I keep forgetting.
Right.
DMV. No one knows what that stands for.
Right. In Maryland, we have the Motor Vehicle Administration, which is where you go to get your driver's license, and the DMV means the DC metro area.
This explains a lot of things I heard when I was down there that make no sense.
Yeah.
So I know that most of your games are nature oriented, and I just was curious, what is your recommendation for the best nature preserve in the DC area for someone who's going to go and visit?
I mean, we have a lot of awesome parks, but it's hard to beat Rock Creek Park, which is within the DC city limits, 1,700 acres.
Wow.
It was our third national park.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So,
cool.
and people call it it functions a lot like Central Park does in New York, in the sense of being sort of the lungs of the city and this natural space that you can get to when you're in the middle of the city. Although it doesn't have as many developed parts as Central Park does. It's just park.
Wow.
Just
that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Just a way to get away.
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, what do you hope for in the next kind of, 5 years for the DC area? Any type of city changes or hopes for the future?
I mean, I think the big one that a lot of people in DC are hoping for is voting rights. A lot of people don't know. So because DC is the city that is not part of a state, they do not have voting representation in Congress. Yep. They have a delegate to the House of Representatives who can be on committees but doesn't get a vote on the floor. And DC doesn't have any senators at all.
Wow.
So, that could get fixed by just giving them some representatives, or a lot of people are calling for actual statehood.
Yep.
And, with every election, people are like, oh, if everything breaks just the right way, maybe we'd have the votes to make this happen. But it's a weird thing that people outside of DC have to decide to give rights to the people in DC, and they're not very motivated to do it. DC's slightly better off than Puerto Rico because they do have 3 votes in the Electoral College.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Also a tough weekend for Puerto Rico. So
yeah.
That.
And Puerto Rico doesn't even get to vote for president. Sorry?
DC. A lot. Well, I'm just saying a lot to go. What voting as Elizabeth was saying. A lot of license plate in DC say taxation without representation. Just to remind you,
Yeah.
Right.
we're paying.
Yeah.
They're paying the taxes, and they don't have any rights.
I think I remember hearing that has stopped because Congress made it stop. But that's another thing that happens, that like Congress is allowed to overturn the rules that DC makes within its city council.
Yeah, DC's under the direct jurisdiction of Congress, which I
Yeah.
was reading about with the whole representation thing. It was fascinating.
It's really weird. It's a really
So
the other thing I really
let's
want to
do
see
that.
happen. So
Yeah.
the thing that is going to happen that I'm very excited about is we're getting a new metro line.
Yay!
Ooh.
So if you can picture the map of the metro in DC, if you've been there, there's the red line that's a big U that goes from one side of Montgomery County down through downtown DC and back up the west side of Montgomery County and Maryland. And there's going to be a purple line that connects across the top of the U, which goes right by my house.
Yeah, but like
Exciting.
Elizabeth, like we've been hearing about the purple line since I've been in middle school,
Yes.
like 20 years ago.
I know.
Like,
And now there's actually there's major construction going on. Like it
I
is
know, but
happening.
it
It's so
took
exciting.
20. I remember I used to like canvas for like politics, and I remember like it was like, yeah, purple line, like in middle school. Like it was crazy. It's been that
It's
long.
all I heard about when I was there.
Yeah. It's causing some traffic jams right now, but in a good way, because it's gonna prevent some traffic
Yay,
jams.
progress.
Love it.
Totally
love
awesome. So, what do you think is a secret gem of the sites and locations around DC? Something that most tourists miss.
I have two things. I'll tell you one thing that you can do as a tourist and one thing that you can't even do as a tourist. So
This is the unattainable board game that's
I
the
like
best
it.
board game in the universe.
love it.
Short
I
term,
love
long term mission.
well, I mean, so my attainable thing, this is like not really hidden, but a lot of people don't make it out there because it's a drive out of DC. But Great Falls on the Potomac is a really beautiful spot. It's not a tall waterfall, but it's like a big series of cascades in a really big river.
Cool.
And people do all kinds of, someone just published a crazy picture of people run kayaks over these things. And it's just,
Whoa.
Wow, that sounds scary.
so if you go out on the weekend, you'll see people doing really dangerous things in kayaks, but it's also just beautiful. And the C&O Canal goes along there. So you can hike for miles from there. It's a great spot, but it's a little ways to get there. If you're in DC without a car, it's hard to do. But
I love this recommendation. I'm working on a waterfall card game, so I'm gonna add it into my card game.
Daryl, this is the perfect time for you to come over and see, because one of the
research.
locks and entrances to C&O Canal is like 2 minutes from my house.
Perfect.
I've walked the C&O Canal many and many times. 2 minutes.
Nice.
So my super secret thing that I have gotten to do that is much harder.
I like it. What is
So
it?
you guys know I used to work on Capitol Hill. I worked in the
Mhm.
Senate, and the Capitol building does not hold all of the staff that work for the Senate. The offices are all scattered among many different buildings, all sort of adjacent to the Capitol. And there is a subway specifically for the Capitol that was built so that members of Congress can get from their office to the floor of the House or the Senate in time for votes.
So cool.
Wow.
That's cool. That's a cool brag.
Cool.
Yeah,
That you got to see that. That's awesome.
yeah. So if you're on the staff, you can use the
I was
little.
gonna
use
say,
it.
what clearance level do you need? I don't think I'm gonna be getting that anytime
The
soon.
Capitol's gotten a lot more locked down. When I first lived in DC, you could just kind of go walk around in it, and since 9/11, you haven't been able to. You have to take a tour. But the Capitol itself, the part you can see, is also a really beautiful building inside. It's covered in art.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So cool. Awesome. Well, Elizabeth, thank you for being our, go-to expert. Our we're gonna check in with you at the end of the show, and you feel free to fact check and correct us for anything else. But we really appreciate you joining us, and we adore you and all that you do. And keep making fun and beautiful things that people gather around a table, and we're gonna keep the conversation going, talking about hotels and sites and all those things. So I'm gonna hide you away until the end, but we'll bring you back for our final question and pass it on to Corey. Corey, talk to us about sites.
It's really funny that in a lot of the cities that we do, hotels are part of it. If you visit the city, there's a hotel, and there's some cool ones and not. But DC, I am just blown away by how many of the hotels are ridiculously cool sites in and of themselves. And the biggest one is at the Watergate Hotel. Of course, this is the center of the Watergate scandal in June of 1972, where the Republicans broke in and tried to do stuff. And it caused the eventual resignation of Nixon. So the Watergate Hotel has kind of built on all of this scandal that happened in the 70s, and you can actually stay in the scandal room, which was one of the rooms used for the break-in and the investigation, and it's decorated all in historical spy stuff and
I love
newspaper
that.
clippings. It's crazy. But of course, the most mysterious part of the Watergate Hotel is the myth and the legend of the Watergate salad. If you don't know, Watergate salad is an abomination to nature. It's basically a mixture of pistachio pudding and Cool Whip.
Yeah.
And no one knows why it's called the Watergate salad. It keeps being tried to be attributed to the Watergate Hotel and the chef there, but it actually was a published recipe from Jell-O. But they didn't coin the name. One of the reviewers of this called it the Watergate salad and misattributed it to the hotel, and it's just turned into a bit of urban myth.
I mean, it honestly looks like all the other like Midwestern salads. Like it has to be a Midwestern thing. It looks like a Midwestern salad.
Maybe it was like inspired by a Midwestern visitor or delegate. And then
I think all you really need to know is one of the alternate names for it is green goop.
I mean, I might like it. I don't know. I know for myself, my go-to tip often when it comes to sites is actually checking out the Waldorf Astoria.
Famous.
It's super famous. It is the old post office building, and the reason I often recommend it, two things. One is has an awesome chef's restaurant inside. Obviously, I'm driven by food, and we'll talk about that more later. But the bazaar is in the Waldorf, which is like a nice kind of Spanish tapas. We'll talk about that more. More my go-to tip of why this is a great site. I've used it multiple times. Is I think it's one of the best spots to get city views from up high. You can actually take a visit up to the top and to the observation deck, and get views in all directions. And I think it's some of the best photos you can get. There is like kind of like a great thing, but the view is awesome. And I always tell people it's a short walk from the White House, and it's one of the coolest spots to just get a view of everything.
And if you're talking about views, I mean, one of the other major ones is the Mayflower Hotel, which is the largest luxury hotel in the area. It's been operating continuously since 1925, and it has all of this DC history in it. J. Edgar Hoover, the old head of the FBI, ate lunch there every single working day from 1952 to 1972. So for 20 years, lunch there every day. The Mayflower also was the hosted site for the inaugural ball for Calvin Coolidge in 1925, and it was the home for the re-election launch for Truman in 1948. So the Mayflower, piece of history and a absolutely massive luxury hotel. But there's so many historic hotels worth visiting and staying at. There's the Hay Adams, which famously hosted Theodore Roosevelt and Mark Twain. And it basically started as a series of homes where dignitaries would just kind of house their friends. And now they've turned into hotel complexes. Along those lines also is the Willard, which is the Willard Intercontinental Washington, originally a series of houses in 1818. This is the first place the mint julep was introduced outside of Kentucky.
Yummy.
Back in 1830.
Fancy.
And Martin Luther King finished the I Have a Dream speech in the lobby of the Willard
Yeah.
Intercontinental.
I've had photos there for that reason.
The historic hotels are just so cool. One of the other big sites, of course, Elizabeth brought it up, but the White House itself. I mean, it has tours. It's absolutely beautiful. Fun fact for you that we didn't get to at the beginning of the show, but Woodrow Wilson is actually the only president who's actually buried in Washington, D.C. And George Washington is the only president who never lived in the White House. So just interesting White House facts.
So you can tour the Capitol. I don't think you can tour the White House.
Oh, my apologies.
Yeah. Or you have to get like special permission.
I was gonna say maybe Corey has. I don't know.
Corey has.
So I wouldn't put it behind.
I'm not allowed to comment on that.
Yeah, you have to like get tickets. It's like a lottery system or something.
And screening and like there's a lot of security steps. Yeah.
So Washington, D.C., we talked about Smithsonian earlier, but we also have a lot of monuments. So many monuments. I would suggest going on a walking tour of monuments, especially at twilight, at nighttime. It's very pretty. Mm-hmm. They're all lit up. You got the Washington Monument, Thomas Jefferson Memorial Monument, the Korean War Veterans Monument. My personal favorite is the Lincoln Memorial and Reflection Pool. It's right on the mall, which we call a big open grassy area. I've spent a lot of time there with picnicking with my friends, hanging out with my friends, a lot of marches because DC has like a march every weekend. And you always end up at the mall during a march. I remember when President Obama's inauguration, me and my friends made signs because we were very happy because that was my first ever election that I was allowed to vote in when I was 18. So yeah, that's my favorite monument, mostly because I have spent so much time in that general vicinity growing up.
That's cool.
I mean, I visited a lot with school trips and stuff, like we said. My personal favorite monument, and favorite is a weird word to use, but it's the Vietnam War. Yeah, the Vietnam War Memorial Wall. It is so stark, and it is just a beautiful park-like area with walls, and the walls have every name of every person they know of who passed in the Vietnam War, and everybody knows somebody, at least in my generation, everybody knows somebody on that wall, and it's just such an impact to see all the names just lined up. So it was very, very moving and impactful for me.
Yeah. Absolutely. That makes sense. I mean, for me, one of my favorites as, non-American visiting, there's still a lot of impact in my life and my culture and our countries, but FDR, that area is, I find very beautiful. There's some waterfalls and some inscriptions to some favorite quotes. One that stands out to me that I want to read out is, we must scrupulously guard the civil rights and civil liberties of all citizens, whatever their background. We must remember that any oppressions and any injustice, any hatred, I lost the quote. Any hatred is a wedge designed to attack our civilizations. And I think the thing that stands out to me every time I visit, and I go every few years, is how much we as cultures and as people run into the same things, and that thing, this wisdom and advice still rings true today. So it gives us an excuse to contemplate and think about the bigger questions in life, and really prioritize justice. And so it's a powerful place to visit. Just the whole, like you said, the mall, the Capitol Plaza, etc.
Absolutely. Just the whole area, walking around, like Beneeta said, everything just brings back these powerful emotions and powerful memories. So we've got Capitol Plaza, which, at this time of year can be really cool to see with the big Christmas tree and get some celebratory stuff. The further memorials, the Jefferson Memorial, the war memorials, it's so powerful. Arlington National Cemetery and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. By the way, just within a month, they've discovered the name of one of the people buried in the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier.
Oh, I heard about that.
That's interesting. I know for me, like the most impactful place that I've ever visited, again, because of my Jewish heritage, was visiting the Holocaust Memorial Museum. For anyone who's ever been, it's an emotional roller coaster. I'll just warn you now. Like, I went on a road trip. I actually, it's funny. I wore this hat and I forgot why I even wore this hat. I went to a Washington ball game, which used to be the Montreal Expos, and I went with a few friends that were big Montreal Expo fans to see their team. They still like pretend it's their team, and we decided to go to this memorial before going to a ball game, and it wiped us. It just like talk about like taking on too much in a day. So, as we're giving advice, please give yourself, breaks and give yourself like the appropriate time to be able to digest and deal with. There's a lot of triggers. There's a lot of like really meaningful ways that they present. I still think about some of the ways they presented things so that you could gain an idea of scope. An example just being like walking into a room and just the smell of just like leather shoes and just like having a pile of that. Or like one of the ones that got me the hardest was you would walk through this long cylinder where there was bridges and you kept cutting through and you'd see pictures on the walls. And as you got to the bottom and you could look up, they said, like, these are all pictures from a village that no longer a single person exists, that this entire legacy is gone. And so like things like that they really were meaningful, really strategic about presenting and giving learning opportunities and kind of influencing all the senses. So just again, a little warning on the, somber side, but there's a whole mix of experiences. I know there's beautiful things and happy things too. Beneeta, I know we mentioned in our Japanese episode, the cherry blossoms. What's the story there?
Yeah. So cherry blossoms, obviously, Japan, very, very famous. But in 1912, cherry blossoms trees were given to the people of the United States from the people of Japan. So cherry blossom season, it's along the tidal basin, and it's typically the last week of March to the first week of April. It's very short. The cherry blossom season in DC is really short. As someone who lives here, I have seen it a few times, but I have not gone in 15 years because, oh my God, the traffic to get into DC, the metro traffic to get into DC, just like the sheer number of people that are in DC those 2 weeks is outstanding. It's too many people. I like cherry blossoms, but I have no desire to like wade through like a million people to see the cherry blossoms. All the restaurants are crowded. So there's been like the last like 5-10 years there were like pop-up restaurants for cherry blossom season. I'll go to that, have a Sakura drink instead, pretend I saw real cherry blossoms, and that's my cherry blossom experience in DC, because I kid you not, people like flood in to see them. So we talked about some pop-up restaurants. DC is known for definitely having a lot of pop-up restaurants and bars, which is really cool. Like, I've been to a fair number. My favorite one was probably the Star Wars one, and we had a Super Mario World one. But Daryl, tell us some more cool food and drink recommendations in DC.
Sure. I mean, we are suckers for fancy foods and all kinds of great spots, and I know I and you each have some great recommendations. But I'd be remiss not to start with a couple iconic spots that maybe aren't so fancy. I mean, the first that I think of is Five Guys. Many people just know the burger chain, but it's a fun, that's my wife's favorite burger joint. And I remember visiting DC and her falling in love with it pre-2000, where
it's so good,
but there were only 5 back then in the DC area. Now, obviously it's easy, but I mean, the story goes that the 4 brothers were given the recommendation, like, you can either go to school or you can pool your money and start a business. And I'm glad they started that business and started that burger joint. And I think they are too. So, I mean, Five Guys, I always think of, I remember like iconic pictures of like Obama, like loving Five Guys and etc. Another, touristy moment for me, and that I had to go to one of the first times I ever visited DC, was the old Abbott Grill. It's Washington's oldest saloon, pub, bar. It's moved around a little bit, but it's always been close to the White House, and it was kind of notorious for a lot of famous politicians and journalists and such. But I know, Corey, you were just in the Maryland, DC area. What were you eating while you were in the area?
I was kind of blown away by the Ethiopian culture within where I was, which was around Silver Spring and Laurel in Maryland. And it was so amazing how deep the Ethiopian culture was there. I've learned since that it is the largest Ethiopian community outside of Ethiopia. And the DC area in general just has an enormous amount. When I visited, Elizabeth was nice enough to take me to a restaurant that was relatively close to where I was staying called Nazrawi. And it was amazing. I love Ethiopian food, and this was one of the best that I've had. We got to take some friends who had never had Ethiopian food before. It was really fantastic. And since Elizabeth actually told me that within 1 mile of her house, there are 19 Ethiopian restaurants at last count.
That's amazing.
So, do you guys have favorite Ethiopian restaurants? I mean,
Yeah,
Daryl, I know you've talked about it.
I know. I even just went for an amazing Ethiopian restaurant in Orlando, of all places, which I did not anticipate. I associate DC and Toronto as a couple of the best Ethiopian restaurant hotbeds. And so I got to give a shout out to, and I'm saying it wrong, I'm sure, Latena Ethiopian restaurants. It's in the Columbia Heights region. That would be my recommendation. I know, Beneeta, you've probably got lots.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you 2. If you're in DC proper, Ethiopic, which is in DC on 8th Street, really, really good, nice vibe and atmosphere. Something slightly more laid back, and if you're in the Silver Spring area, I like to go to Bete, Ethiopian cuisine. It's a lot more casual than Ethiopic, but also very good. Both are fantastic. Ethiopian restaurants. Ethiopian is definitely like one of my favorite cuisines. I mean, that injera bread, the sourdough fermented bread. Oh, so good.
You're making me hungry. All right. Well, I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a few kind of iconic or go-to spots. One is Ben's Chili Bowl. Again, we're talking about, some spots right downtown. This is going to bring you to a different neighborhood. Famous for half smokes, milkshakes, chili dogs. Oh, I could go for that right now. Real hungry. Another go-to spot if you're looking for breakfast food, starting at 7 a.m., open, all day breakfast. There's locations around the city. I know of the one in Chinatown, but Founding Farmers and Distillers, you can't go wrong there. Big hearty portions, super yummy. Another one I want to give a shout out to that I remember, I hope it's still going strong, is Florida Avenue Grill. It was, at the time at least, what I knew of as the oldest Black-owned American restaurant in the city. Again, just wholesome, go-to, yummy soul food. But yeah, so we love go-to spots like this, but also we love fancy. So we I mentioned Jose earlier with his restaurant that's in the old post office. He has already the Bazaar meat, and I know Beneeta and I have loved his food in Vegas. Yeah. We've experienced him there, but he has a place that I've been wanting to visit and haven't been able to yet, and that is called Mini Bar. And it's just all these little small portion app type things where he's so creative, and so he just tries to push the limits and just give you these crazy magical bites. So I know that's one of my 2 Michelin star wish to hit list spots. And another one is Chef Ryan Ratino has a place called Jont. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, but it's a seafood and meat from Japan, kind of, a young chef. There's so many. I mean, Beneeta probably could do a whole hour show of talking about all the amazing places. We had to pick a few. So these were a few of the Michelin 2 stars. I know, Beneeta, there's one of the 2 stars that you really love. What's that place called?
Yeah, so Pineapple and Pearls is by Chef Aaron Silverman. It's like a lot, but inspired by Studio 54 clubbing and nightlife. I haven't been to that one, but I've been to the sister restaurant, Rose's Luxury, which is slightly more affordable. When I say slightly, I do mean slightly. It's still expensive, but and
we're
it's
still talking Michelin. Yeah.
We're still talking Michelin. It's still a Michelin star restaurant, but it is so good, and they do such like interesting meals. I have heard if you want to go to the 2-star Pineapples and Pearls, they have like a counter service, and I think
Ooh,
you can order food from that,
good
and
tip.
how
it's
fun.
slightly more. It's less expensive. I'm never
Right,
gonna
right.
say cheap, but
Little more
less,
accessible.
less
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah, we're not, and I mean we've already talked about him, but I want to give a chance for you, Beneeta, to share a little bit more about
Yeah.
Jose, because he has done some pretty amazing things and is kind of like the go-to chef of Washington. Can you tell us a little bit about why he's such like a local hero?
So, he was the founder of the Global Food Institute at George Washington University. He's also the founder of the World Essential Kitchen, which is a nonprofit devoted to providing meals in the wake of a lot of natural disasters. Like, he has done that in so many different locations. We mentioned that he owns like Mini Bar and the Bazaar, again, very expensive, fancy restaurants. But he also has a lot of, less expensive but just as good restaurants. I used to go to Haleo a lot, which is like a tapas restaurant. My personal favorite in the slightly more affordable range of Jose Andres, because I've been to a lot of them, is Chile Chilcano, which is a Peruvian Asian fusion restaurant, which is such an interesting combination. And I remember going to it first time so many years ago, because I like going to different restaurants in DC. And I was just like, oh, this is great. I've been back multiple times, which I feel like when you have so many good restaurants in DC, it's hard to go back to restaurants because you want to try so many. But that was a really, really good one. Okay, so but Daryl, what is your dream restaurant to visit in DC?
Well, okay. I have wished to go here. I would love to stay there. Talking about hotels and restaurants. There is a place called the Inn at Little Washington. It's the only 3-star restaurant in DC. It opened back in 1978, and it's actually what the first restaurant back in the day in the Washington area to both get a AAA and a 5 diamonds for food / accommodations. It was the first ever to like get on a bunch of different guides. It's had tons of nominations and awards, including one of the ones that I love following is the James Beard Foundation, where they give out prizes for best food and best service and wine lists and best chefs for different regions and chefs of the year. And they've won them all. They've been awarded multiple times for each of these. I have seen over the years, and probably my reason that I always wanted to go there was a number of years back. I saw pictures of Alan Moon, Scott Aldi, and a few others,
Really?
all having a fancy dinner there. And ever since I've seen that post, I've been like, oh, someday I will get to go there. That's on my bucket list.
When are you going to come visit me in DC? I've invited you so many times.
I know. Well, we need to do that. What maybe I do is I keep applying to get in there, and then maybe the four of us can go. We're all in. All right.
Elizabeth, here first. The private chat. Elizabeth's in. Let's do it.
All right. So let's try to get that rezo, and then we'll worry about booking everything else. But I know too, Beneeta, you're one of our go-tos because obviously this is your neck of the woods, and we've had some good cocktails and drinks over the years. What are the go-to spots in the DC area? Where should I go?
So DC has a really interesting drinking culture, maybe because a lot of us have worked on the Hill, are working on the Hill. We work in politics. So really big happy hour culture. Would it be remiss not to talk about that? Also a really big bottomless brunch culture, meaning bottomless food, more likely bottomless drinks. And as someone who spent her 20s going to DC all the time, I did not realize that was not a thing in all the other cities. But yes, bottomless.
I think that should be in all cities.
It should be in all cities. It should definitely be in all cities. But yeah, some of the places I like to go, one place is really fun vibes is, and mind you, this is somewhere where I go as 30-something, so if you're looking for the 20s,
Corey,
that was DuPont.
you and me. I don't know. We might be.
I am in a whole other category from you
Right.
guys.
That's
Yeah,
right.
these are all going to
See
be
how white
so
this is?
dependent. But I really like
I'm
Green
turning
Zone.
white.
It has a lot of really good Middle Eastern cocktails and really fun vibes, and obviously like really good
That sounds
music.
really cool.
Always, I love Green Zone. If you like whiskey, you got to go to Jack Rose Bar and Anna's Morgan. And also, I mentioned we have a big happy hour culture, bottomless brunch drinks, and we also have a lot of rooftop bars, like a lot of rooftop bars in DC.
Cool.
And one of them that is like iconic is the POV rooftop bar. I've actually celebrated like, I don't know, my 27th birthday there, some birthday there. And when you go outside, you have like a really good line of sight to the Washington Monument. So going there in like the evening is great. It's really pretty. So
Wow.
yeah, I mean, if you ever have any questions about where to go in DC, hit me up.
Yeah. No, I love it. That's just a start. So yeah, please, you're going to have to hit up Beneeta directly for more of those recommendations. And I would be remiss before we close out food and drinks. I mean, I feel like this has like become a thing that in every city, Corey, you have a go-to gelato spot.
Well, I mean, ice cream is ridiculously important, and gelato is ridiculously better than ice cream. So I have to throw out Patango. So Patango gelato is, I haven't gotten a chance to go yet, but I have heard firsthand from all these people who've gone, and just looking through their list of flavors. Oh man.
What flavor do you want?
Oh, I want all of them. They have cardamom, they have black tea, they have cinnamon.
Wow.
Halava. Halava is one of my favorite desserts, and they have a halava gelato.
I don't even know what halava is. What?
Oh my goodness. Halava
you're talking about halva?
Well, in the New York Jewish culture, it's probably the same, but we pronounce it halava.
Oh, I think there's like a lot of variations of it.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I didn't know what that was called. Okay.
Yeah, halava. And they have cinnamon, they have black sesame seed. I mean, just going through their website list of flavors is stupid huge. It's got so many amazing things in there. So that is my go-to list, more than the 2 and 3 star Michelins. I want to go to this gelato place.
I mean, why not both?
Patango. I want to just live there.
Yeah,
we can go to both of them. Yeah, we need to find a date to go to this. So I've never been, and I know Elizabeth hasn't either. I mean, maybe Elizabeth and I should go.
Add it to the list. No. Save it for our big meal day. So awesome. All right. Well, I mean, as always, time has flown by. And thank you, Corey, for rounding up our food time with a little dessert. Not that I wasn't already hungry enough. But on to our final portion of the show. We're going to invite our special guest, Elizabeth, back for our final question. And also, any fact checking, any things that we missed, Elizabeth, that came to you while we were talking?
When you were talking about the mall, I realized we didn't mention one of the biggest events in DC, the 2 weeks around July 4th, the week before and after, is the Folklife Festival. They take over the entire mall. They set up tents and they have music they pick a few cultures every year, and they bring in musicians from those countries or regions. Like this. So it's like 2 weeks of free music on the National Mall that anyone can go attend, and other cultural stuff too. They bring in artists, and it's amazing. It's like the worst possible weather time to have an outdoor festival.
Yeah,
it is slightly, but it is
good way to get a bird.
Worth it.
Also, I realized we never mentioned the Kennedy Center in like geekiness.
Right.
Like Kennedy Center, I have spent so many. I've been to so many shows at the Kennedy Center. Like, how could I not mention it? Like, DC is a great city. It's I feel like it's underrated. I think personally it's better than New York. But
whoa. Okay. Shots fired.
Shots fired.
I love it. All right. Well, we only have time for one more question, and this is our final question for the show. Obviously, the election is coming up, and we want to encourage people to vote. If you haven't already, early voting's already happened. But let's do, what is a good voting game or election themed game? What is the best one? Elizabeth, we'll give you the most time to think about it as our special guest. Give you a little time, and hopefully we won't overlap. Instead, we will go. Let's go alphabetically because how fun is it that we are B, C, D, E? So
That is
let's
pretty
go.
cool.
Beneeta, what is your
Could not
pick?
have planned this, even though I planned this.
I know. So I'm gonna cheat a little bit, and I'm just gonna do the most DC game.
Okay.
The one game that comes to mind when I think of DC is Watergate. Watergate is a
Okay.
2-person tug and war game by Capstone Games, and basically is, will Nixon triumph against the press, or will the truth be exposed? It's literally about the Watergate scandal, and you either are Nixon or you're either the press, and you are playing cards. You have a little board where you're trying to reveal evidence or hide evidence if you're Nixon. And there's different ways to win for either side, and it is brutal. It is cutthroat. You all know, for most of you know that Casey, aka Brandon Jar, is a very good friend of mine. Legitimately, like, probably had a fight because of this game. So, like, keep in mind. And I've heard from like other people, or like, and like I've heard from some couples where they're like, we do not play this game as a couple because it is brutal.
Good warning.
It's fantastic, and it's so DC. I mean, it's called Watergate, y'all.
Love it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Corey, what's your pick?
I'm going a little off here. I'm picking an older German game, 2016, called Tiefe Taschen. It was redone into the game Good Critters. And yeah, there you go.
I was not expecting that. Tiefe Taschen to Good Critters.
I know. And this is a game where you secretly, one person has control of the money, and they're going to distribute the money in exchange for votes, and people will vote on who gets to do what. But at the same time, you can blackmail the other players, and you can steal money. You can bribe players to vote your way, which they're not obligated to do. So it's about collecting money in this strange, secret passing of notes kind of manner. So it's Tiefe Taschen by Fabian Zimmerman.
I have never played that. Now you have named a game I want to try, Corey.
Oh, I've never named a game that Daryl has not played.
Yeah, it's a weird feeling. Is this what people feel like this time? I don't know what that is.
Surprise, I just made it all up.
Yeah, it could be, and you got me. My pick is actually, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I just played it a few days ago, and that is 1960, The Making of a President, which I'm really excited that I got signed by the creators. But I also give it like a little shout out for just a specific mechanic. So over the years, Jason Matthews and Christian Leonard have like used and developed the system that they've come up with for a bunch of different games. I love, for instance, Founding Fathers because they thought of a way to make it more than 2 players. And I'm a big John Adams fan. But the ultimate mechanic that I want to see in more games is this little tally thing they used in Campaign Manager. And what they do is, obviously, in this version, it was 2008, so it was a race to 270 seats. And so every time you won something, you got a length of the state, one way or the other. And so when you added on to it, the first... You don't have to math. You don't have to count things up. It's just the first person to get it long enough, which I just love as like, counting to 270 each. Me and Matt Kint played this, and I think scoring took us like 10 minutes. We had to end up pulling out our calculators. But this is such a nifty little way to show that mechanic. So anyways, just giving that a shout out. And hopefully bought you enough time, Elizabeth, for your selection. I'm
going to call it Votes for Women by Tori Brown, who was living in DC when she designed it. She's now up in Baltimore, which is, it uses some of the same system that 1960 Making of the President uses. It's card-based, and you're fighting for control state by state to get women's suffrage passed as an amendment to the Constitution. And I thought they were clever that you can play it sort of with one player playing the anti-suffrage side, or you can play co-op.
I know, like who wants to play that
no one is comfortable trying to fight against the Vote for Women.
Yeah. I am
Yeah.
anti-suffrage.
Oh,
Like,
No,
Corey
this
does
villain.
not reflect the opinion
Yeah,
of Nerdabout. Whoa.
No.
No, there's a series of games out there I find fascinating that are historically relevant about touchy or very difficult subjects, and
Yeah.
it's hard to play the
other
devil's
side.
advocate side. And Votes for Women is one of those really educational ones that I just, it was an experience playing it.
Yeah, which is neat that they thought through that and offer the opportunity to play both on the same side and Automaton the other side. I think that's really interesting.
I mean, the amount of research that went into that, and like what all the different factions, and it really gives you some good insight, I think, into how hard it is to get something done.
Yeah,
I have not been able to play that one. I would like to.
Yeah, that's on my wish to play list. I haven't played it yet, but looks amazing and great pick, everyone. As we call it a show, we've reached our time, but I just want to say thank you to Elizabeth for being our go-to expert in the area, and I thank you all for tuning in. If you want to find us, we're each gonna maybe give a little selfless plug. I know this is hard for us to do, but Elizabeth, where could people find you if they want to follow along and see what you're doing?
Yeah, I think the easiest thing is to go to my website, which is Eliz Hargrave, ELIZ Hargrave. .com, and from there I've got links to I've got a newsletter, and I'm on Blue Sky and stuff like that.
Amazing.
And I have to shout out that your website is absolutely magnificent. I have used your website as a reference point resource for so many different things. You've got links to so many different people. It's I love it.
Yeah. Well, Corey, on that note, where can people find you?
Oh, I am generally Above Board TV on most of the social media, or Dice Tower Dish. I'm also one of the hosts of Board Game Insider, which is boardgameinsider.com. So pretty easy to find me.
Yeah.
I am Beneeta Kaur everywhere, Beneeta_K. I will be streaming tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, the new game from Ivy Studios, Tend. I'm going to be doing a solo playthrough. It is a big boy, so come and hang out with me.
It looks cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, people can find me, on Facebook, Instagram, wherever. It's just my name. Sometimes with my middle initial M for Michael. But yeah, I just want to say thanks. I think Corey was officially, you were saying goodbye, but
not to worry at all.
I screwed up at the end here.
Anyway, tune in next week, same time, same channel. We are airing on Tuesdays at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And next week on the schedule, all things going well, I think we're talking about Orlando.
Yeah.
Orlando.
Bye, everyone.
Take care, everyone.